Hi, this is Rob. Welcome to another episode of the Fundraising Bright Spots podcast. This time, we're looking at ways you can increase fundraising income with major donors and trusts and foundations. It's with an outstanding fundraiser named Amy Swart, who is Head of Fundraising and Communications at the fast-growing suicide prevention charity, James's Place.
The ones that you've built the connection with, they care about the organisation. They've bought into your vision. So actually, by giving them the opportunity to kind of get in at the earlier stages, when it's not all set out, makes them feel like the best donor in the world. One of the core things that we practice at James's Place is pick up the phone and start that conversation, start that relationship. You're not going to start a relationship over email. We know that there are men that need the services that James's Place offer. There's a real urgency. We just got to live that throughout all of our fundraising as well.
I loved hearing what Amy shared. In particular, the conversations gives us insights into how to build warm, two-way relationships with funders and potential funders, and how you can build a culture in your team and your charity to do the same. Hi Amy, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you very much for having me.
You're welcome. I've been looking forward to our chat. You and I get to chat now and again anyway, but I'm delighted that you finally agreed to come on our podcast. You and I have worked together off and on for quite a few years. We first met when you were at the NSPCC. You were a very good fundraiser then in a high value fundraising team, and you've had various interesting jobs ever since. And I've long wanted to be able to pick your brains on behalf of our listeners about high value fundraising. Before we get into all of those ideas, where do you work now?
I work at a charity called James's Place, and we stop men dying by suicide. So we work with men who are in suicidal crisis and help them to get through that crisis and get better. Yeah,
and it's such a crucial cause. I know your organisation's been growing. It needs to grow, but it has been growing recently. And that's lots of hard work by lots of people. But for the last several years, you've been Head of Fundraising and Communications at James's Place. So that's looking after many things. But I know that a really important part of your fundraising mix at your organisation now is high value fundraising, major gifts and donations from trusts and foundations. So a lot of what I wanted to talk about today is about that speciality. To set the scene, there has been growth recently. Could you give us a sense of how you're doing?
Yes, lots of hard work over the last 4 years. When I joined the charity, we had one centre open and we're raising kind of between 600,000 and £1 million over the previous years. We're a really young charity, actually. We only started in 2018 anyway, so that growth has been pretty steep. Since I joined, we now have 3 centres operational where we're treating kind of 1,200 men a year, and we're going to be opening the 4th centre early next year, and our income projection for this financial year will be around 4.3 million. Nearly all of that is high value. That is our core. It's how we've developed over time. So it's a key focus for everybody. So building that culture of philanthropic fundraising across the whole organisation has been absolutely crucial to that growth.
Yeah, and goodness knows, everybody must have been working hard. It sounds like high tempo to go from that standing start in 2018 to be able to open new centres and do it so quickly. I guess my starting question is, what are some things that you feel are important in high value fundraising, and maybe all along in your career, you know, they were always true, but they're as true as ever now, and that for you in your fundraising and with your team that you try to focus on to help achieve these results?
I think what has always driven me from the beginning at the NSPCC all the way through every role that I've had is that donor at the heart of everything. I suppose I just really care about them, and I believe really utterly and strongly that them giving is going to make their lives better. And I suppose I've been lucky enough, worked really hard enough to know that that is absolutely true. I've seen it myself. My first kind of big gifts and the big relationships that I really focused on from the NSPCC, but all the way through, really understanding that person, caring about them, thinking about how to connect them most with what they're doing has driven everything. My first big donor that I worked with at the NSPCC, I was quite very new to fundraising, but took on a relationship with an existing donor who was one of those brilliant classic NSPCC stories of someone who had given £2 a month and then kind of gradually grown their donation. But when I took the relationship over, they were giving £200,000. So it was, really good donor, brilliant to have in my portfolio. When I'd started in the team, I'd probably written a couple of reports for him. I was a PA to start with, so I kind of knew a little bit about what they supported. But I think having that opportunity to just steward and just get to know the individual over the course of that donation was amazing, because there was no pressure to ask again or no pressure to move it forward. It was just purely getting to know him, making sure that he saw the kind of results, felt the impact of his gift, essentially. So that gave me the opportunity to build all of those relationships throughout the organisation for the project that he supported, learn about them, pick up the phone, talk to them about what they were up to, so that I could give those snippets of stories to him over the phone whenever I got the opportunity to speak to him, and really learnt so much about him just by being curious, by asking, and just I really cared about him, I suppose, and just loved to understand what were his underlying drivers. He was a really interesting guy, and over time, I basically, over that 3-year period, really understood some of the deeper reasons that I don't think he would have talked about had I not been so curious, had I not spent all that time getting to know him and asking about him and his life. So then when it did come to the organisation re-strategising, we had these big new thematic areas of the organisational strategy. One of those areas just chimed so beautifully with some of what I'd found out about him that I thought, oh my goodness, there's actually a real opportunity here for him to kind of give more and have bigger impact, but given a slightly different way as well. It was not about a specific project at that stage. It was ideas, it was a theme without much kind of understanding of what that would achieve, making a huge difference to a particular group of children. As I'd had those relationships across the organisation as well, and I'd really championed him and helped other people understand him as a donor, I was able to, I suppose, influence them to perhaps take a bit more of a risk with that ask and share information earlier than they wanted to share with the public, and really championed him. And then when it came to asking him to support that whole strand of work, it felt very natural. It didn't feel like, okay, and now we are going to ask. It was very much part of the conversation, and he went away to consider what he could do and ended up massively increasing his gift from that £200,000 to 4.5 million over a number of years, over 5 years, which was absolutely incredible. What an amazing opportunity for him. He had really stretched his giving so that he could make a much bigger impact and help the organisation achieve a lot more for that group of children.
Thank you, Amy. It's such an interesting example, and several things occur to me, but one of them is to do with vulnerability and being able to handle uncertainty. I'm reminded of that excellent book by Brené Brown about vulnerability, and I think she's got an excellent TED talk as well. But in terms of your relationship both with the donor and potentially with colleagues as well, lots of things are not certain, but you're needing to allow people or enable people to take a risk even though everything isn't perfect yet. Quite a common thing fundraisers ask me about is, Rob, my charity hasn't signed off the strategy yet, so I can't talk to the donors yet. And I've always remembered this example of you building a wonderful relationship and having these conversations with the donor, even though that organisation, your charity's strategy, was far from signed off and even clear. And when you asked him if he'd like to donate to help something wonderful happen in this particular area of the strategy, very little was clear, but you did it anyway. I wonder what your take is on why it succeeded and any tips for the fundraiser listening who's in that boat.
It's so tempting, isn't it, to have a specific project very well laid out, all the budgets, everything lined up and in a perfect brochure and ready to kind of offer up. And I think maybe that's what some donors need and what a lot of donors need. But I think the ones that you've built the connection with, you've connected them with the organisation. They care about the organisation. They've bought into your vision and they believe in the organisation and what it's there to achieve. So actually, by giving them the opportunity to kind of get in at the earlier stages when it's not all set out, makes them feel like the best donor in the world because they are enabling the organisation to achieve more. So I think that was definitely true for that particular donor. And at James's Place, there are several donors who they're almost like our founding donors and they feel so connected to what we're achieving and so part of that growth that they don't require that level of specificity in terms of projects, because that's what their connection is. You know, we're showing them the stories of the men that they're helping all the time, but it's not about the exact how we're doing it necessarily. It's why. It's all about the why. Although we've got a team of 7 fundraisers now, it was just me and one other for a good couple of years. You know, we've really grown the team in the last year. But before that, it was every day, okay, deep breath, we're going in and we're going to do everything that we can to build brilliant relationships and have the impact that we want to see. That was it. We've got lots of great connections who are offering opportunities to us, and that's amazing. But trying to manage them all is really, really challenging. And so at the beginning, it was about being brave. Okay, right, we're going to try and do all of this stuff and learn as much as we can. But over time, knowing that's not really feasible. And so we had to do that to learn about the kinds of people that were coming to us, so the kinds of opportunities, so that we could say, okay, actually, I know that this one is going to work, or I think these are some of the key indicators that I'm seeing from the opportunity that I think make it more likely to be where I should spend most of my time, and try to manage the others more efficiently, I suppose. But it took a while for us to get to understand what those key indicators were.
Thanks, Amy. I get a strong sense of how important a value of courage is in the face of uncertainty throughout your organisation and everything that James Place stands for. Another theme I'm picking up is relationships, and goodness knows our listeners probably are aware that so much of fundraising success is about good relationships and caring about the donor. But I wonder if you could give us your take on what that means in practice, on how does one, even if one thinks relationships are important, how does one manage to create deeper, better relationships with people who care about our cause?
This is all relationship-based fundraising, but to start that relationship, you've got to talk to them and get as many chats as you possibly can. So one of the core things that we practice at James's Place is pick up the phone whenever you can and start that conversation, start that relationship. You're not going to start a relationship over email, I suppose, you can try, but it's going to take a really long time. We know that there are men that need the services that James's Place offer. There's a real urgency. We just got to live that throughout all of our fundraising as well. So picking up the phone, having that conversation, expediting that relationship by cutting out 3 months worth of back and forth of emails, by having that initial conversation on the phone is absolutely key.
Yeah, and so just to be clear, these are not completely cold calls, are they? But they are, for some reason, there's someone in your sphere who does care. Maybe they've been introduced to you, or they came to an event, or there's been some interaction by, for instance, email, which is going to go slower and is okay, but it's never going to really get things moving quickly. But in those contexts, I know many fundraisers continue with those channels of communication. And you're saying wherever possible, if we have the phone number because it's in the person's email address and because we've got permission to use the phone, we are going to use it. Have I understood that right?
Absolutely. Some of the donors that we're working closely with do have a connection to us or might have been introduced to us, but some don't, and some will have seen about the organisation, might have Googled it or might have seen an article in a newspaper and will send an email to us. So, yeah, they're not cold calls in that we've got a list of phone numbers that we're calling, but they're not people we necessarily know.
Hi, it's Rob. Now, if you need to increase high-value income this year, our corporate partnerships and Major Gifts Mastery programs will help. The next ones start in October 2025, and the super early discount and bonuses are available if you get in touch now. To give you a sense of what they're like, here's feedback we recently received from Michael Strand, who at the time of recording was 2/3 of the way through the current Major Gifts Mastery.
On the many training courses I've been on over my career, if I come away with 1, 2 or 3 little nuggets, that's a good course. But I've got pages of stuff that I've made notes of and I'm sharing with people on a regular basis. It really helped me because the outcomes of sticking to my process meant a 6-figure charitable gift from a donor to create 3 brand new nature reserves in the UK. So thank you.
To find out more or take advantage of the early booking bonuses, head over to brightspotfundraising.co.uk.
One donor, I received an email from who just said, I'd like to know more. I lost my husband to suicide. I'd really like to talk to you about what we might be able to do and perhaps in partnership. So, okay. There was a phone number, called them straight away and just started that conversation. But I think for a lot of cold approaches to us, it's a chance to really listen to them, to offer them the opportunity to talk about, in many cases, the person that they've lost. And because I had that information about her family and what they wanted, I could relay that to my CEO, to my director of services and say, I think this is going to be worth us having a really solid presentation meeting to them and start to draw together everything that we would need that would show the impact that could happen. And it also enabled us to have that conversation really early on to say, if this is really big, what could that do? Could it mean that we could open this centre, the next centre, a bit earlier? It took a while, not loads of time actually, but another few meetings, a kind of a visit to one of our centres, and then, their discussions with their own trustees. But they ended up making a really good 6-figure donation to this Newcastle centre that meant that we could open that centre along with another donation 4 months earlier than we would have been able to. And that's 150 men that were seen in that period that otherwise wouldn't have got the support that they needed.
It's so extraordinary, actually, when you put it in those terms. Oh, we're all trying to move things along as well as we can, of course we're all busy, but when you put it in terms of 150 men who are really in trouble, struggling with the darkest thoughts and frankly are in danger, many of them, 150 of them got access to these wonderful services that wouldn't have. It's extraordinary, isn't it?
Incredible. Like, what a privilege to enable that.
That is an amazing example, Amy. And there is a pattern in both these examples you've shared, whereby clearly it wasn't just the fundraiser doing their best. Clearly it wasn't the generous person who cares doing their best. But fundamental to whether it worked or not was the whole organisation seeing an amazing opportunity based on trust, but also information that you were able to understand and convey. And therefore, all three parties to be able to be brave and make something wonderful happen. I wonder, maybe some of these things are obvious, but we don't always have time for them. But lots of charities don't necessarily give enough time and attention to the donor's point of view, and they might miss some of these amazing opportunities. I wonder, either from that story or in general, what you've learned about helping the organisation and your non-fundraising colleagues to care about the donor's point of view.
I've always seen that as a massive part of my job. I probably spend 50% of my time doing the internal stuff, and building my own relationships with those people and those colleagues. But also, I see myself as the champion of the donor and to the organisation, and the champion of the organisation to the donor. So I really do see myself as that bridge in lots of ways, and it's such a privileged position to be in. But I think using those stories internally so that they can really understand who those donors are. And I think sometimes, rightly or wrongly, colleagues can have a preconception about these high value supporters. And my job is to dispel those and to give the human side, just as my job is to give the human side of the organisation to the donor. So, yeah, always sharing those stories of what it means to the donor, I think really helps. And I'll do that in lots of different ways. It might be a team meeting with my team. It might be in my one-to-ones with the CEO. With the trustees, I'll always share the stats and I'll share the numbers, but I'll share the stories of the donors just as I would the other way round. But I also think that relationship building with other colleagues starts right from the off. It's not necessarily for each donor. You need to build that base level relationship with everybody by caring about what they're doing as well. So we're all one organisation. We're all trying to strive for this incredible impact. We all muck in and we do what's needed. And that really builds that sense of team. It builds trust. It gives you the opportunity to tell people those stories about the donors and about the team and about the guys that we're working with. And that it's made such a difference. It means that the clinical team are more likely to share stories with us. You know, it's very symbiotic now, I feel. So I think that's a key part of it.
So definitely a theme I'm picking up from the way you approach high value fundraising, Amy, is rather than keep things at arm's length, respond to emails, certainly there's a feeling of safety and control when we communicate with and respond to donors in that way. But you're in a hurry and those you serve can't afford to wait necessarily. So wherever possible, I get a sense that you and your team are trying to get a conversation. I don't know if you've got any last take on how that can pan out.
Yeah, absolutely. One of our kind of core themes in the whole team is get test drives, get those conversations. And so in all of those opportunities that come through, now that the team is bigger and it's not me doing it myself necessarily, really empowering the team to just pick up the phone. You know, we're really good at getting those test drives, but often the way that we're getting them is very long. I suppose it takes ages because you're trying to organise a chat via email. and then takes all of your control away, I think, because once you've said, oh, can you do this date? Then you have to wait for someone to reply to say yes or no, I can do that date, and then have the amazing meeting, because we love having those meetings. So wherever possible now, in those emails, first thing I ask, is there a phone number? Is there a phone number in their signature? Have they given you their number? Because that is the biggest and quickest way to get that meeting and to have that first chat. So one example, we had a trust that wasn't on our radar at all, emailed and said, we'd like to learn more about James's Place. We'd seen you in the Times Christmas appeal this Christmas, and they'd seen some of our content and wanted to learn a bit more. So that came through, and I looked through the email and saw that they'd put a phone number down. I said, well, my trust fundraiser, this is great. Got this lead, let's do a bit of research and due diligence, but why don't you just give them a call? So she did a bit of background. Definitely a trust that we wouldn't have found through research. Their kind of themes on the Charity Commission were not what we would have immediately gone for. But she was brave. She picked up the phone. She had a chat to this guy who literally said, how lovely of you to call. Nobody ever calls anymore. Actually, one of my fellow trustees is here in the kitchen with me. I'm going to put you on speakerphone. And she had an amazing meeting with 2 trustees, impromptu, but that, I think, just sped up that whole process so much. Not only was she able to convey what the organisation was doing verbally, and which is much quicker when you're talking, but she met 2 of the trustees, and that just expedited the whole process. And they said, OK, great. The next step would be to come in and visit. Can you arrange that? She arranged a brilliant meeting with the chair, with the CEO, and proceeded through that whole process, and they've pledged another, high 6-figure gift to our next centre that enabled us to say, OK, actually we've got sufficient funding now, we can start to look for a building, we can proceed, and will mean that we'll be able to open it on time. And just so brilliant, just great for her confidence in doing that. It's quite new in post, maybe 2 months in post. Amazing bravery. But I think that story now, sharing that with the rest of the team, just makes us all believe more and more, right, never mind this email back and forth malarkey, wherever we can, we'll just pick up the phone and call them straight away.
And by now I've heard enough of those examples to absolutely share with people on our programmes just how valuable this principle is. The truth is, several times you might do it and it might not lead to a chat. Someone might not answer at all. They might not be able to talk then, or they might not want to talk. But oh my goodness, so many times you and Ben and I have heard examples when it does pay off, that absolutely it's high up on our list of things to be minded to do when you can and when the opportunity avails itself.
Absolutely.
Amy, I'd love to talk on and on. So many great examples and sound insight to help our listeners, but we need to wrap up soon. Thank you ever so much for coming along to the podcast to share these examples. I really appreciate it, and I look forward to catching up with you very soon.
Thank you, Rob.
Well, I hope you found Amy's ideas helpful. As we always do, we'll put a summary in the episode notes on the Brightspot website, including a link to some of my other favourite episodes on successful high-value fundraising. I know there's a good chance you've already subscribed to this podcast, but in case you haven't, do click the button now. You'll immediately get access to dozens more examples and tips to help you. Over the next few weeks, I'm sharing lots of new Brightspot stories through the podcast, so please don't miss out on the chance to receive those straight away when we release them. Remember, if you find this podcast, my blogs, or my Breakfast Club helpful, and you're curious about the difference it would make if we could help your team go much deeper, then do get in touch to request a chat. If you work in major donor or corporate fundraising, our famous Major Gifts Mastery and Corporate Partnerships Mastery programs will lift your confidence and help you raise more money. Or if you're the leader of a team, our bespoke away days will help your team to improve their skills and spark a new momentum in their fundraising. To find out more or request a chat, go to brightspotfundraising.co.uk/services. I really hope you enjoyed today's show. If so, and you think it would help other people too, please do share it on with your colleagues and with other charities through LinkedIn. I always appreciate your help. Thank you so much for listening and supporting my show. I'll be sharing more Bright Spot stories with you very soon.